Homeowners Associations, or HOAs, have become an integral component of many residential communities. These organizations are established to maintain the aesthetic and functional quality of neighborhoods, enforcing a set of guidelines that homeowners agree to abide by upon purchasing property. While their primary goal is to promote a harmonious living environment, the extent of their authority can often lead to contentious situations. HOAs wield considerable power when it comes to regulating various aspects of community life. Their governing documents outline rules that cover everything from landscaping and exterior paint colors to noise levels, and notably, parking regulations. Homeowners are typically required to park in designated areas, and violations can result in fines or other penalties. This brings us to the crux of the issue: the right to park in one's own driveway, a seemingly innocuous act that can become a flashpoint for conflict. In many cases, HOAs justify their regulations by claiming they protect property values and enhance neighborhood aesthetics. However, this often translates into a rigid enforcement of rules that can feel invasive to residents. For instance, my own experience with the HOA began when I found myself on the receiving end of a hefty $1,000 fine for parking in my driveway. While I believed I was simply using my property as intended, the HOA viewed this as a blatant disregard for community standards. Navigating life within an HOA involves careful adherence to these regulations, often accompanied by a sense of unease regarding oversight. Homeowners are subject to inspections and can be reported by neighbors for violations, creating an atmosphere where compliance is paramount. This obsessive regulation raises questions about the balance of power. At what point does standard enforcement cross into overreach? The governing structures of HOAs can create a double-edged sword for residents. On one hand, they provide a framework for maintaining neighborhood standards. On the other, they can enforce constrictions that undermine homeowners' autonomy. Understanding this dynamic is crucial as we delve deeper into my story, one that illustrates not just a personal grievance, but also highlights broader themes of community governance and the ramifications of authority when it goes unchecked. This experience became the catalyst for my own rebellion against what I saw as an unjust punishment, a struggle that would soon escalate into my quest for revenge against the very system designed to regulate our shared lives. One sunny afternoon, after a long day of work, I returned home and parked my car in my driveway as usual. It was a routine I had never thought twice about. After all, it was my property, and the driveway was built for that very purpose. However, little did I know that this seemingly mundane act would lead to a shocking encounter with my homeowners association. The following week, I received a letter in the mail from the HOA board. As I opened it, my heart sank. The letter contained a $1,000 fine for unauthorized parking. Confused and infuriated, I reread the rules outlined in the HOA's governing documents. These regulations stated that homeowners were allowed to park in their driveways, but with stipulations. Vehicles must be parked neatly and not obstruct any walkways or violate any aesthetic standards. In my case, my vehicle was parked perfectly within the lines, and there were no obstructions. Determined to contest this decision, I reached out to the HOA management for clarification. Their response was disheartening. They claimed that my vehicle was detracting from community aesthetics due to its age and model. It felt utterly absurd. Who determined what constituted acceptable aesthetics? The idea that a car parked in my own driveway could be seen as an eyesore left me feeling frustrated and powerless. During the next HOA meeting, I attended with a few neighbors who had also faced similar fines for minor infractions. It became clear that the enforcement of these rules was arbitrary at best. Some members of the board seemed overly eager to penalize homeowners for any perceived violations, while others openly acknowledged that the rules felt unreasonable. Despite this acknowledgement, the board maintained its stance on power dynamics. As I sat there listening to their discussions, my anger simmered beneath the surface. The situation became more than just a personal grievance. It represented a broader issue of authority and control over individual rights. At that moment, I realized that I needed to stand up, not just for myself, but for all homeowners who felt oppressed by these draconian rules. This incident served as the spark igniting my desire for revenge against an unjust system that regulated our lives so heavily. Upon receiving the $1,000 fine from the HOA, my initial reaction was one of disbelief. I remember staring at the letter, rereading it several times as if the words would suddenly change. How could this be happening? It felt surreal to think that I had been penalized for something as fundamental as parking in my own driveway. My heart raced with a mix of anger and confusion. How could an organization claim authority over such a personal aspect of my life? The frustration mounted as I considered what this fine meant, not just financially, but emotionally. It felt like an invasion of my personal space, an infringement on my rights as a homeowner. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, authority, and community living principles that were purportedly built on trust and the shared responsibility of maintaining our neighborhood. As I mulled over the situation, feelings of powerlessness washed over me. I realized that many residents likely felt the same pressure to conform to unreasonable standards imposed by the HOA. What should have been a place of comfort and pride now seemed suffocating, leaving me questioning not just my standing in the community, but also the very foundation of our shared living arrangement. This experience catalyzed a shift in my perspective on community living itself. No longer did I view my neighborhood simply as a collection of friendly faces. Instead, it appeared as a battleground where unwritten rules dictated interactions and actions. The sense of camaraderie that I once cherished began to feel more like compliance born out of fear of repercussions rather than genuine connection. I found myself isolating further from my neighbors. Every glance or wave felt tainted by judgment or unspoken scrutiny based on appearances or adherence to HOA regulations. Instead of unity, there was an unspoken tension that loomed over us all, a constant reminder that we were being watched and judged for our choices. This emotional turmoil laid the groundwork for what would become a deeper rebellion against the HOA's authority, an urge not only to reclaim my rights, but also to stand against a system that stifled individuality and freedom in a space meant for enjoyment and community spirit. As my anger simmered over the HOA's unjust fine, a surge of determination began to replace my feelings of powerlessness. I realized that I had a choice. I could continue to accept their authority or devise a clever response that would make them think twice before imposing such penalties again. The wheels started turning in my mind, and I began brainstorming ideas for my revenge. First, I considered organizing a community meeting to bring together frustrated homeowners who shared similar experiences with the HOA. By rallying support from my neighbors, we could create a united front that would amplify our grievances. Perhaps we could draft a letter expressing our collective dissatisfaction with the enforcement of unreasonable rules, demanding changes while emphasizing community spirit rather than compliance through fear. Alongside this approach, I toyed with the idea of a lighthearted campaign to highlight the absurdities of HOA regulations. A tongue-in-cheek social media page dedicated to our neighborhood could serve as an outlet for sharing stories of ridiculous fines and grievances. This platform would not only entertain, but also educate residents about their rights. I envisioned catchy memes and humorous posts that cleverly critiqued the strict enforcement while fostering camaraderie among homeowners. Another thought was to take direct action by creating an eyesore display in my front yard. I imagined transforming my property into a whimsical showcase with inflatable lawn ornaments, bright colors, and unconventional decor, essentially a playful protest against the aesthetic standards imposed on us. It would challenge the HOA's definition of what constitutes acceptable appearance, while inviting laughter and conversation among neighbors rather than fear. Most importantly, I contemplated using the legal framework to my advantage. Delving into local laws concerning homeowner rights might reveal loopholes or protections against overreach by the HOA. Armed with this knowledge, I could confront them not only emotionally, but also from a position of informed strength. The more ideas I entertained, the more empowered I felt. My mind swirled with possibilities for retaliation that were not only clever, but impactful. Action that demonstrated my refusal to be bullied into submission, by an organization that had overstepped its bounds. This brewing plot fueled not just my need for revenge, but ignited a fire within me to reclaim our community as one built on mutual respect rather than oppressive rules. Determined to make a stand against the HOA, I realized that I couldn't do it alone. I needed the support of my fellow homeowners. Remembering that many of them had voiced frustrations in passing conversations, I set out to connect with those who shared similar grievances. Rather than isolating myself further in anger, I decided to reach out and build a sense of community and solidarity. I began by organizing an informal gathering at my house on a Saturday afternoon, inviting my immediate neighbors and those I had spoken to at the last HOA meeting. To my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were eager to share their stories, and what started as a few casual conversations quickly turned into a passionate discussion about our collective discontent with the HOA. Individuals recounted experiences with fines for minor infractions that they felt were unjust, everything from lawn decorations deemed inappropriate to excessive scrutiny over fence colors. As we exchanged tales of frustration and disbelief, it became clear that we were all plagued by the same oppressive atmosphere created by the HOA's stringent rules. This realization fostered a strong sense of camaraderie among us, turning what could have been isolated grievances into a shared cause. We decided it was time to take collective action rather than suffer silently under the weight of unwarranted punishment. To further our efforts, we created a WhatsApp group as a means of ongoing communication. This would allow us to share updates not just about HOA news, but also about personal experiences that might warrant community action or solidarity. As members began to contribute actively, our messages ranged from sharing victories in negotiations with the board to supporting each other through ongoing disputes. One neighbor even suggested organizing a community barbecue where residents could come together informally, fostering both fun and connection while allowing for open discussion about HOA regulations in a relaxed environment. The idea delighted everyone. After all, creating bonds over burgers made challenging conversations feel lighter. As our collective resolve grew stronger, so did our commitment to stand up against perceived injustices enforced by the HOA. The newfound support invigorated me. No longer did it feel like an uphill battle against the system. It felt like we were ready to confront it together. Our united front became not just about reclaiming individual rights, but also about restoring a sense of community that had been overshadowed by regulatory oppression. With a united front of neighbors behind me, I decided it was time to investigate the legal framework surrounding homeowner associations and our rights as residents. The more I learned about HOAs, the clearer it became that many homeowners were often unaware of their legal protections. I set out to research local laws governing HOA operations, hoping to uncover any loopholes that could bolster our case against unjust fines. I began by scouring online resources, visiting local government websites, and reading state statutes related to property and HOA governance. I discovered that many states have laws designed to protect homeowners from unreasonable restrictions imposed by their HOAs. For instance, there are regulations that require HOAs to provide clear notice before imposing fines, as well as rules about how those fines should be enforced. These laws often emphasize transparency and due process, which can be crucial in challenging automatic penalties like the one I received. Next, I combed through our HOA's governing documents, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, to see if they aligned with state regulations. To my dismay, I found several discrepancies that hinted at potential violations of both our rights and the bylaws themselves. For example, one section stated that fines must be proportional and reasonable, yet my $1,000 penalty for parking in my own driveway clearly seemed disproportionate. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I consulted a local attorney who specialized in real estate and HOA law. Our discussion revealed even more potential avenues for recourse. The attorney explained how community members could challenge the board's decisions and argued that we could formally request explanations for any excessive fines or restrictions imposed on residents. The thought of leveraging legal action against the HOA felt empowering, It transformed our frustrations into actionable strategies. In parallel, I began gathering documents and testimonies from my neighbors who had also faced punitive measures from the HOA. This collective evidence provided a stronger foundation for any potential legal challenge we might decide to pursue. We aimed not only to address my situation, but also to ensure fair treatment for all residents going forward. With every piece of information I uncovered, my confidence grew. Our united efforts were no longer just about making noise. They were fueled by a robust understanding of our rights and protections under the law. The realization that we had legitimate avenues for challenging the HOA's authority motivated us even further to reclaim our community from what we saw as oppressive governance. We were ready to confront the HOA, not just for ourselves, but for every homeowner who felt marginalized by their rules. Fueled by our collective determination to stand up against the HOA, I began implementing creative tactics to showcase our defiance in a lighthearted yet impactful manner. The goal was to send a clear message that we would not be intimidated by arbitrary fines or oppressive rules while bringing our community closer together in the process. One of the first ideas that emerged was a driveway day. We decided to choose a Saturday where every neighbor would park their vehicles in their driveways, regardless of whether they were compliant with HOA regulations. To make it more festive, we encouraged everyone to decorate their cars with signs expressing our shared frustrations. For instance, slogans like "Proudly parked in my driveway" and "Fines, not today" captured both our humor and unity. As cars lined the street, the site became both a playful protest and a display of solidarity that would be hard for the HOA to ignore. In addition to Driveway Day, I collaborated with my neighbor, who was an artist, to create a series of humorous yard signs that could be strategically placed around the neighborhood. These signs featured witty phrases like "Warning, parking at your own risk, fines may occur," and "Caution, creativity zone, expect the unexpected." These lighthearted messages helped to overshadow the oppressive atmosphere instigated by the HOA, turning our frustrations into something that could evoke laughter. During our community barbecue that we initially suggested as a way to socialize, we further built upon the momentum by declaring it a resistance barbecue. It became an opportunity for residents to share their own stories of absurd fines and unfair treatment while bonding over grilled food. We set up a table where residents could write postcards addressed to the HOA board members, demanding respect for our rights as homeowners. Together, we created a wall display representing all of the issues we faced, a powerful visual reminder that we were united against unwarranted penalties. Finally, we decided to launch a tongue-in-cheek social media campaign dubbed HOA Shenanigans, where residents could anonymously share their encounters with the HOA's strict regulations. The campaign quickly gained traction within the community and beyond, providing another outlet for residents to express their frustrations while fostering connections. Through these creative tactics, our message grew stronger, one of resilience, humor, and community. As we pushed back against oppressive rules, not only were we reclaiming our rights as homeowners, but also reinforcing the very fabric of community spirit that had been eroded by fear and compliance. It became clear that together we could advocate for change with determination and laughter. The momentum we had built through our creative protests and community gatherings began to catch the attention of local media. It started when a neighbor, enthusiastic about our collective efforts, shared some photos from our driveway day on social media. The images of colorful cars, decorated with playful signs, quickly went viral within our town's online community groups. This buzz soon attracted local journalists who were intrigued by a story that highlighted the clash between homeowners and their governing associations. Within days, reporters began reaching out for interviews, eager to cover this grassroots movement against what they perceived as overreach by the HOA. I found myself discussing our experiences on local news segments, articulating how arbitrary fines and strict regulations were undermining not just individual rights, but also community spirit. I shared my own story of receiving a $1,000 fine for parking in my driveway, emphasizing how this experience reflected a broader issue faced by many residents, feeling marginalized by authoritarian HOA rules. As the media coverage expanded, it sparked significant public interest beyond our neighborhood. News outlets presented our actions as a powerful example of community resilience and activism. People from surrounding areas began to reach out to share their own stories of similar frustrations with HOAs, creating a sense of solidarity that transcended borders. More than just a local issue, it became a topic of discussion at community meetings across the region. This newfound visibility shifted the narrative around individual rights versus HOA regulations. What once seemed like isolated grievances transformed into a public dialogue about homeowner autonomy and the need for more balanced governance structures. Our collective actions resonated with many residents who felt similarly oppressed, leading to discussions about reforming HOA policies at local government levels. In response to the increasing attention, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting to address the growing backlash against their practices. They realized that their stringent enforcement tactics were no longer going unnoticed or unchallenged. As I attended this meeting, I felt a thrilling mix of anxiety and empowerment. Our voices had finally begun to echo beyond our neighborhood. The turning point arrived when the HOA proposed to review their regulations and consider input from homeowners in future decisions, a direct result of our unified stand against their authority. This moment underscored the power we held when we came together as a community. It was no longer just about me or my fine. It was about reclaiming our rights and ensuring that our voices were heard in shaping the future of our neighborhood. The journey had only just begun, but we had made significant strides in redefining what it meant to live in harmony within our community while respecting individual rights. Following our grassroots movement and the heightened media coverage, the HOA board finally agreed to meet with a representative group of homeowners. The tension in the room was palpable as we gathered for what would be a pivotal discussion about the future of our community's governance. Armed with documentation outlining our concerns, including examples of arbitrary fines and overly strict regulations, we aimed to foster a dialogue that could lead to meaningful change. As we sat around the table, I took a moment to gauge the attitudes of the HOA representatives. Initially, their demeanor was defensive, perhaps anticipating a hostile confrontation. However, as we began presenting our case, highlighting the collective frustrations expressed by residents, it became evident that they were listening more intently than I had expected. I led off by sharing my personal story of receiving the $1,000 fine for parking in my driveway, emphasizing how this incident was not just an isolated occurrence, but symptomatic of broader issues confronting many residents. My neighbors subsequently shared their own experiences, creating a powerful narrative illustrating the need for change. The mood gradually shifted from defensiveness to openness as they absorbed what we were saying. During our discussions, it became clear that some members of the HOA board recognized the growing discontent among residents and were beginning to understand that their stringent enforcement tactics could backfire. I proposed action items such as establishing clearer communication channels between the HOA and homeowners, implementing a system for appealing fines, and periodically reviewing regulations to ensure they remained fair and relevant. Another homeowner suggested an ongoing forum where community members could voice concerns in a more structured way, allowing for open dialogue without fear of retribution. Surprisingly, several board members nodded in agreement and expressed interest in collaborating with us on these initiatives. They recognized this was an opportunity for them to rebuild trust within the community. By the end of the meeting, we had reached an important milestone. The board agreed to draft a revised set of guidelines that would incorporate homeowner feedback and establish a more transparent process for handling disputes. They also committed to hosting quarterly meetings where residents could engage directly with board members. Walking out of that meeting felt surreal. Our actions had indeed prompted change. It was clear that our united front had created enough pressure for the HOA to reconsider its approach to governance. We left with plans for future meetings and renewed hope that democracy was alive within our community, marking not only a victory against unjust fines, but also a step toward creating a more equitable living environment for everyone involved. Reflecting on this tumultuous journey, I've recognized the profound lessons learned about community dynamics, individual rights, and the delicate balance between compliance and standing up against authority. Initially, my experience with the HOA fine felt like a personal attack, an invasion of my rights as a homeowner. However, it soon evolved into a much larger narrative about what it means to live in a community governed by rules that can sometimes feel arbitrary or oppressive. One of the most powerful revelations I had was understanding the importance of collective action. Alone, my voice may have been diminished in the eyes of the HOA, but uniting with my neighbors transformed our grievances into a powerful movement. We discovered that many residents felt similarly marginalized, and together we amplified our concerns in a way that could not simply be dismissed. This camaraderie not only sowed seeds of solidarity, but reinvigorated community spirit rapidly eroded by fear and compliance. Navigating this process also highlighted the complexity of authority within communities. While HOAs are established to maintain standards and protect property values, they must not infringe upon individual rights or stifle residents' voices. Through our negotiations with the HOA board, I learned that even established authority is capable of change when faced with informed and united opposition. It was an empowering realization. The board was not infallible. Rather, they were simply individuals making decisions that could be influenced by community feedback. Moreover, I came to appreciate the value of dialogue over hostility. Initially, there was tension between homeowners and the HOA representatives, yet fostering open discussions allowed for mutual understanding. Both sides entered the conversation with preconceived notions about each other. However, as we shared our perspectives constructively, barriers began to break down. While change takes time and continuous effort, this experience reinforced my belief in advocating for one's rights while promoting a collaborative environment. It showed me that standing up against perceived injustices can initiate meaningful changes, not just for oneself, but for an entire community. As we move forward from this pivotal moment, I am hopeful that the path towards balanced governance continues. Each resident deserves to feel heard and respected within their own homes, a principle I am committed to upholding as we navigate our shared lives in this community together. The journey has taught me resilience and unity can transform obstacles into opportunities for positive change, an invaluable lesson I will carry with me beyond these walls.